The National Guard came to Los Angeles, California to fight unrest. Now the troops ended up fighting boredom. More than a month after President Trump deployed the U.S. military to Los Angeles amid immigration sweeps, the troops have largely disappeared from public view. Tyrone Bowman live. According to the Los Angeles Times, the California branch, they were deployed by President Trump's administration to combat violent insurrectionist mobs in and around Los Angeles, but in recent days, the only thing many U.S. Marines and California National Guard troops seemed to be fighting was tedium. There's not much to do, one Marine said as he stood guard outside the towering Wilshire Federal Building in Westwood this week. The blazing protests that first met federal immigration raids in downtown Los Angeles were nowhere to be seen along Wilshire Boulevard or Veteran Avenue, so many troops passed the time chatting and joking over energy drinks. The Marines, who decided to give his name, or decided not to, or declined to give his name, because he was not authorized to speak to reporters, said his duties consisted mostly of approving access for federal workers and visitors to the Veterans Affairs Office. More than 5 weeks after Trump mobilized an extraordinary show of military force against the will of California Governor Gavin Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass, few National Guard troops and Marines have remained in public view, most retreating to local military bases in Orange County. As an indication of the military's dwindling role in immigration enforcement operations, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth on Tuesday ordered the release of 2,000 National Guard troops. Now Bass, Newsom, and others are demanding the complete removal of remaining troops, or about 2,000 California National Guard soldiers and 700 Marines. Thousands of members are still federalized in Los Angeles for no reason and unable to carry out their critical duties across the state. Newsom said on X, accusing Trump of using California National Guard troops as political pawns. End this theater and send everyone home, the governor said. Bass said the troops' primary mission in Los Angeles was to guard federal buildings that frankly didn't need to be guarded. They had to leave their families, they had to leave their education, they had to leave their work, Bass said at a news conference this past Tuesday. We have had no problems for several weeks, so why were they here? Steve Wolford, a resource counselor for GI Rights Hotline, a nonprofit group that provides free confidential information to service members, and calls from troops had gone down dramatically over the last month. The most recent people I talked to sounded like they're sitting around bored without much to do. Wolford said, and they're happy with that. They aren't asking to do more. At the same time, I don't think people see a real purpose in what they're doing at all. The majority of National Guard troops have been stationed at the Joint Forces training base in Los Alamitos, according to military officials and governor's office officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity. Over the last few weeks, a massive tent city has risen at the Orange County base about 25 miles southwest of downtown Los Angeles. The tents, some of which stretched up to 50 yards long, providing living quarters, cafeteria service, and other facilities. On a recent morning, National Guard troops, some dressed in full combat fatigues, others in t-shirts and shorts, could be seen exercising, milling about, and playing a game of touch football. A separate group of Marines and National Guard troops have remained at the Westwood Federal Building for an entire month. The federal building has been outfitted with sleeping and eating arrangements for troops, according to a Marine who spoke with the Times. To be sure, some California National Guard troops embarked on tense missions with federal immigration agents on sweeps at farms, warehouses, and public streets. On July 7, Guard troops accompanied federal agents as they descended on MacArthur Park on horses and in armored vehicles in a heavily militarized show of force, it's still unclear whether any arrests were made that day, but crowds quickly formed around federal agents and military troops screaming for them to get the out. A few days later, guard troops wearing riot face shields and clutching long wooden batons faced off with hundreds of protesters in Ventura County as immigration agents arrested about 200 suspected undocumented immigrants at Glass House Farms, a large licensed cannabis greenhouse in Camarillo. But most of the deployed guard troops and Marines do not appear to have been engaged in raids or even the federal building security in recent weeks. An estimated 90% of the National Guard troops stationed in the Los Angeles area over the last few days have not been deployed on daily missions, according to a source with Newsom's office who has knowledge of the military operation. For the most part, they're sitting around, the source said. The source, who spoke on condition of anonymity because they were unauthorized to speak publicly on the deployment, said an estimated 3% of the 4,000 troops, about 120 soldiers, were taking part in daily missions, mostly consisting of security at federal buildings. An additional couple hundred were standing by for quick response force missions, ready to mobilize within a few hours for an immigration raid or a crowd control operation. But even if all those troops were used each day, the source said that still left about 88% of the 4,000 troops, or about three-quarters of the remaining 2,000 underutilized. The Pentagon, the task force 51, the military's designation for Los Angeles area troops, declined to answer questions about how many Guard troops and Marines were engaged in protecting federal buildings or accompanying immigration agents on daily missions, nor did they comment on the claim from Newsom's office that some troops were sitting around. Guard soldiers and Marines were primarily protecting fixed site federal facilities and protecting federal law enforcement personnel while they conduct immigration enforcement activities such as warrant services, read a task force statement. Federal officials also declined to provide precise details on the cost of the deployment. Hegseth previously said that the mobilization of troops would cost $134 million, but it's unclear whether that estimate is accurate. Jennifer Cavanaugh, Director of Military Analysis at Defense Priorities, a military research group, said there's little evidence that the military presence is necessary. The need for military force in Los Angeles is low, while the need for National Guard forces elsewhere in the state is rising. Cavanaugh said that they're still deployed after so much time, when there doesn't seem to be a need, suggests that this really is about setting precedent of having military forces involved in immigration enforcement and deployed in U.S. cities. Well, as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a happy sight out in California. Never surrender, never quit.